Probably the loudest, best voice on school choice, Mr. Corey DeAngelis.
How's everybody doing? Yeah, I hope you follow me on Twitter. Look, I mean, you might see me fighting with Randy Weingarten every day. You might get sick of it, but yeah, maybe we can rename me the #1 Twitter troll of the teachers' unions of all time on Twitter. I'll take that. I mean, what was she doing in Ukraine, by the way? I mean, I remember like a week ago on Monday morning, I wake up and I'm like, this has got to be a Babylon Bee article, because she said something along the lines of, I'm in Ukraine, I'm going to the front lines. What are you going to do? Make the war go remote? Like you did with the schools here in the United States? I mean, look, thank you guys so much for coming here. I don't even know if I'm using the mic right now, but it's kind of loose. But Jake, thanks for your kind words as well. I think you hit the nail on the head. There is a lot of indoctrination happening in the schools right now, and the #1 problem there is that it's inherent in the public school system that is, by definition, going to fail when you have a one-size-fits-all solution and you have tons of families who just inherently disagree about how they want their kids raised. It's okay to disagree about what the curriculum should be in the classroom, but you also hit the nail on the head in that if you want to go to a school that I don't agree with, that's fine with me too. If you like your public school, you can keep your public school. Unlike with the whole doctor thing. But look, Vodi Bakum said it best once. We got to stop sending our kids to Caesar and then act surprised when they come back as Romans. There are other people raising your kids right now. Schooling is simply an extension of parenting, whether you like it or not. And this is part of the reason why we've seen such a surge in support for school choice over the past couple of years. Families who thought that their kids were getting a good education, whether it meant there was a A-rated school by the state, maybe their kids were getting good grades on their report card, on math and reading, on the test scores. But these families, the same ones who thought that their kids were doing a good job, that the schools were meeting their needs, started to see another dimension of school quality, which is arguably more important. Whether that school's curriculum is aligned with your family's values. And Pew Research Center just yesterday, I was looking on Twitter because I'm on it too much, released a nationwide survey asking families in public versus private schools, is the curriculum aligned with their values? It was overwhelmingly more favorable to students in private education, which makes sense because families voluntarily seek out those schools and choose. That doesn't mean private schools are perfect. There are some private schools teaching things that families aren't happy with. But you're more likely to get an alignment with the curriculum and your family's values if you're voluntarily making that choice to send your child to that institution. That can work in the public schools too, but it doesn't always happen. Wes Cantrell, former representative in Georgia, is here in the front row. I'm so glad you came out. I will say on Twitter, one of the most viral videos I had was earlier this year when Wes Cantrell put on a master class in the Georgia legislature about how to make the argument for educational freedom. One of his colleagues on the other side of the aisle had a pretty basic question that we've all heard before, which was, look, I hear what you're saying with school choice, but what about the accountability? What if the private schools don't have the same level of accountability as the public schools? Wes Cantrell whipped back very quickly. He was ready for this one. And he said, you're right. They don't have the same level of accountability. Private schools have a much higher level of accountability because if they don't do a good job, they're going to go out of business because families can vote with their feet. I think Dan Bongino picked it up and talked about it on his show. It was, that's the way to do it. If you want to look up how to make the argument for educational freedom, just go to my Twitter and look up, in quotes, from DeAngelis Corey, quotes Wes Cantrell, and you'll see how it's done. Thank you for coming out, everybody. Do you guys want to do the thing? Yeah. I'm bringing my phone out. The thing is, I usually go everywhere all across the country. I'll do a selfie and say, it's pretty basic. Even if you went to government schools, you can figure this one out. 4 words. I say it's time for Georgia to fund students, which are 2 words, and you guys say, not systems. Okay, here it goes.
Wait, what do we say?
Fund students, and then you guys say, not systems. And I only post it on Twitter if you're loud enough. So we gotta make the Georgia legislature and the entire rest of the state hear us in the theater today. The lighting's pretty good up here for you guys, not so much for me. I'm perfect. It is time for Georgia to fund students,
not systems.
All right, let's bust the roof off one more time. We'll give you one more shot. It is time for Georgia to fund students,
not systems.
All right, thank you so much. That's all I really wanted to do, so I'm not going to talk anymore. I have some more things to say. Look, it's a great time to be an advocate for educational freedom. Does the video need this to pick up the sound or not? Look, it is just a good time. Right? I mean, so many bad things have happened over the past couple of years. We can't overlook that. But the silver lining of the lockdowns is that families got to see what was happening in the classroom, and there's been surges in support for educational freedom. In Georgia, for example, they put it on the Republican primary ballot whether you support school choice. That number increased from the last time they did it in 2020 by 6 percentage points, with now 79% of Georgia Republican primary voters supporting school choice, with the funding following the child to the public or private school of their choosing. And it's not only happening in Georgia. We saw this in Texas. They had it on the Republican primary ballot as well. And it increased 9 percentage points since the last time they had it on the primary ballot. If you look at the latest Real Clear Opinion Research polling nationwide, we've seen 72% of Americans nationwide supporting private school choice, allowing the funding to follow the child to the education provider of their choosing, with supermajority support among Republicans, Democrats, and independents. This really shouldn't be a partisan issue, but if you think about it makes it really difficult for people in office when you're getting a lot of campaign contributions from the teachers' unions. Randy Weingarten, who I mentioned earlier, over 99% of her campaign contributions in the 2022 cycle have gone to Democrats as opposed to Republicans. But that doesn't mean that Democrats on the ground do not support school choice. And in fact, we've seen some high-profile Democratic gubernatorial candidates flipping on the issue of school choice lately. Josh Shapiro in Pennsylvania, he wrote in education savings accounts lifeline scholarships into his education plan. Less than 2 months before the election, we saw Governor Pritzker in Illinois, a Democrat, also flip on the issue of the scholarship program that they have in Illinois. And I think it's because we have a new special interest group in town. You know, for a long time in K-12 education, the only special interest represented the employees. But now the kids have their own unions, and they're called parents, and they fight harder than anyone else because they care about their kids more than anybody else, and they have more power in numbers. So I think politicians all across the country are reading the tea leaves. They're looking over at Virginia and saying, I don't want to be like that guy, Terry McAuliffe, who got on the debate stage and says, I don't think parents should be telling schools that they should teach. That didn't really work out for him all that much. Glenn Youngkin won on the issue of education in Virginia, in a state that went 10 points to Biden just the year before. If you look at Washington Post exit polling the night of that election last year, Youngkin won with education voters by triple the margins he won overall. This is by 6 percentage points with education voters, and education was the number 2 issue in that election, which barely ever happens. So the political winds have shifted, and we've also seen a lot of legislative victories as well. In 2021, we called it the year of school choice. We had 19 states enact or expand programs to fund students as opposed to systems. Georgia had an expansion. We didn't have as much victory as we would have liked. Wes Cantrell had the blueprint for how to do it. He had a bill, House Bill 999 or House Bill 60. There were 2 of them going at the same time. And Georgia could have beat Arizona at being the first basically universal program to fund all students as opposed to the buildings. Unfortunately, fortunately for Arizonans at least, not so much for people in Georgia, Arizona just went all in. They went and passed the, that's why I don't want to mess with the mic. They went and passed the most expansive program in the nation, the biggest victory in school choice history. Every single family, regardless of income, regardless of zip codes, regardless of background, will be able to take their kids' education dollars at the state level to the education provider they're choosing. That could be the public school, a private school, a charter school, or a home-based education option. Thanks so much, Jake. You have to get to another event. See you next time.
See you, man. We'll talk soon.
But Governor Doug Ducey just signed this bill into law. It's the biggest victory in school choice history, and hopefully more states will engage in some friendly competition and do the same thing. What's interesting in Arizona is they had 1-seat Republican majorities, and they were able to get it done. That means every single Republican had to show up at the legislature in each chamber to vote in favor of their party platform issue, which happens to be school choice. It went all in with the slimmest of margins. So that means no other state that has a GOP-controlled legislature has an excuse not to support school choice for every single family. Georgia has about 60% House and Senate even before November 8th comes. There's no reason Georgia cannot go all in on educational freedom next year. And look, the political winds have shifted, and a lot of politicians are seeing that if they don't support parental rights in education, it could emerge as a form of political suicide. Look at what happened in Tennessee, for example. They had in their House primaries for the GOP, 9 Republicans were endorsed or funded by the teachers' unions. 10 of them were. 9 of them lost their seats or lost their primaries. The teachers' union endorsement, in a way, is becoming a political kiss of death in Republican primaries in particular, and it is a litmus test issue. There's no reason why you can't supporting families having a choice in their children's education. Look at what happened to that one organization. What's its name? We got to change its name, honestly. It's the National School Boards Association. Anybody hear about that? Why was there even a National School Boards Association to begin with? Doesn't make any sense. I thought public education was supposed to be a local thing. What better way to make education local than putting that control into the most local level of accountability, which happens to be the individual family unit. It's not the school district, it's definitely not the state, and it's certainly not the federal government. But you had this National School Boards Association colluded with the Biden administration, sent a letter to the Department of Justice, and what did they try to say parents were? Terrorists. They the particular line in the quote was that some parents should be investigated for domestic terrorism. They were invoking the Patriot Act. What in the heck is wrong with you trying to label parents after their schools have been closed for basically 2 years as domestic terrorists for wanting more of a say in their kids' education? For families not wanting sexualized curriculum in front of their kids, for parents not wanting to send their kids to institutions where they feel like they're being brainwashed to hate them for 13 years. Parents weren't happy. This was them overplaying their hand, the National School Boards Association. And what happened to them? Real accountability from the bottom up. Parents and the state-level school board association voted with their feet in a way. 26 state-level school boards associations hold their funding or their membership from the NSBA. We got to drop the N off their name. Maybe we'll call it the Regional School Boards Association at this point, because so many states have left and they've essentially imploded upon themselves. And the best part about it is it was their own dang fault. And look, so this really goes to show you that, and if I'm talking too much, Christy, where you at? Come throw me off the stage, or Holly, or Jamie, if you want to come, Wes, if you want to take me out, let me know when I'm over time, because I'm just going to keep rambling and rambling until I can't talk anymore. But look, the political winds have shifted. There's a new special interest group in town. The parents, they just want more of a say in their kids' education. And the teachers' unions have overplayed their hand, awakened a sleeping giant. And at this point, they're actively destroying their own empire. And it's absolutely glorious. The first government school monopoly to fail was in Arizona. The first government school domino to fail was Arizona, and we'll see that happening in more states going forward. Hopefully Georgia can get it done soon. There's no excuse for it not to happen. 60% GOP-controlled House and Senate, with also Governor Kemp, who's a supporter of school choice as well, should be able to get it done at the same time. Look, you might hear some arguments against this. Wes had to deal with it every single day. It's a ridiculous argument. The strongest one that they'll use, which isn't very strong at all, is they'll say, this sounds fine, or they'll actually try to say, you already have school choice. You can pick a private school if you want. Just pay for it yourself, peasant. It's basically, Mary Antoinette would be proud, because it's basically them saying, let them eat cake. Not everybody can just pay out of pocket for private school tuition and fees. We're already spending the money that should go to people, not buildings. And this is an equalizer at the same time. It allows less advantaged families to access educational opportunities. But then they'll turn around and say, but you're stealing money from the public schools. Well, you know what? The money does not belong to the schools, public or private. Education funding is meant for educating the child, not for propping up and protecting a particular institution. I don't care what the label is on the school. I don't care if it's public or private. Parents just want the best opportunities for their kids, and who are you to tell them that they should be forced to spend their state-funded taxpayer dollars meant for their kid at a residentially assigned, government-run institution? That is absolutely ridiculous. We would never do that with food stamps. What if we told low-income families they must spend their food stamp dollars at a residentially assigned, government-run provider of groceries? That would be absolutely ridiculous. Nobody would be for that. We already have public dollars going to private institutions for basically everything else. So think about Medicaid vouchers. You can use Medicaid public dollars at a private, even religiously affiliated hospital. Anybody hear Pell Grants or the GI Bill? These are technically taxpayer public dollars that can be used at the public community college if you want, or the public university, but you can also take that funding to a private, religious or non-religious university. The funding follows the decision of the student. Think about pre-K programs. You can use Head Start funding from the federal level or other state-level pre-K programs at private, religious, or non-religious providers of pre-K. We should be able to do the same thing with the in-between years of K-12 education. And fund the people, not the buildings. The other response I have to this argument is a question. It's a rhetorical question because we all know the answer to it. But it's, why would this happen? Why would giving families a choice defund the public schools? And just sit back and wait. Usually when I get blocked on social media. I had the Texas American Federation of Teachers chapter recently block me. I wear that as a badge of honor. Thank you. Randy Weingarten hasn't done it yet. I don't know what. I mean, she just turns off her she closes her comments like she closed the schools. Yeah. She turns off the replies so that no one can ratio her into oblivion, which used to happen basically every day. Now we just quote tweet her and respond. But there's no good response to why would this happen, because they have to basically admit that they understand that families aren't happy with what they're getting in the current system. That's an argument for choice, not against it. Because why? The families who have the means can already get out of those schools. Let's allow all families to exercise their right to have the education provider that works best for their kids. The kids don't belong to the government, and their children's education dollars do not belong to the government-run institutions. It belongs to the family, and children, the parents have the best, they're in the best position and have the best knowledge about their children's needs when it comes to K-12 education and just about everything else. In Georgia, you might hear another argument, and we've heard this in Texas too. This sounds great and all, and they can do this. They'll say, you can do this in Arizona, you can do this in Florida. I don't have to vote with my party platform issue because we have rural areas in my state in Georgia. That's what you'll hear. You've heard this in Texas, but it sometimes only happens in one chamber. You have people, legislators in the Senate in Texas, in the same area, who will vote for ESAs, and then you'll have union-endorsed candidates in the House who will make this argument, which is a convenient excuse to go against their own party platform issue. But the big mistake problem with the logic of this argument is you'll hear two logically incompatible things at the same time. Anybody hear that? I've seen that two-button meme on social media. You got the guy sweating, and he's trying to pick which button he should press. It's used to illustrate two things that someone is saying that is logically incompatible at the same time. You'll hear, we can't use this in my area. I'm in a rural area. We don't have any private schools. Or maybe we just have one. First of all, one option is better than zero options, so I don't want to hear it. But then second, if you don't have any private schools in your area, you should have the least to lose. You should have the least to worry about. You should be the last one making this argument about it defunding the public schools. But then you'll hear out of their next breath, they'll say, we can't use it, but at the same time, this is going to destroy our rural public schools. You saw this in the debate in Oklahoma with Joy Hoffmeister, who went to a private school herself, the Democrat candidate. In the debate said that school choice, as championed by Oklahoma Governor Kevin Stitt, is a rural school killer. But if you can't use it, how is it going to kill your school? If you don't lose any students, you're not going to lose any funding attached to those students. You should be the last person voting against educational freedom. You have zero excuse to do this. This is just an argument to side with the establishment, to go against your party platform, and to go, more importantly, against parental rights in education. That is not going to stand any longer in any state, and hopefully when more red states follow the lead of Arizona, blue states will follow as well, because this is not a partisan issue. Families care about their kids regardless of their background, regardless of their political affiliation. Parents don't give a crap about the label on the school. They just want the best school for their kids. And look, we're already seeing high-profile Democratic candidates switch on the issue of educational freedom. Hopefully this leads to the bipartisan backlash against the establishment that is needed for all American families to have educational freedom. We're seeing this happen in other states. It should happen in Georgia as well, which I also have to point out, Georgia was one of the first bills to start making this bipartisan thing happen. Wes Cantrell's bill had, I think, 4 co-sponsors at first, and 2 of them are Democrats, 2 of them are Republicans. It doesn't need to be a partisan issue. And you know what, Republicans in the room, if you don't snatch this opportunity to become the parents' party, the Democrats might come and snatch it away from you. It's a popular issue. We're seeing this happen in other states, and the more that the GOP leans into parental rights as a political loser, the more it will become politically disastrous for Democrats to oppose it, and at the end of the day, that will lead to more educational freedom for families, to make this a nonpartisan issue. And I want to thank you guys so much. I've talked long enough. Let's get to the next